Welcome to 365 Brothers, the podcast. Today, we're speaking with a San Francisco native who is a lineman for a Northern California utility. He's also part of the Coalition for Black Trade Unionists, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Cloudell Douglas. Welcome, Cloudell.
Thank you. How are you today?
I am fantastic. Would you share a little bit about yourself with the listeners?
Yes, well, like was already stated, I am a San Francisco native, although I don't live in San Francisco currently. I live migrated to the East Bay and currently live in San Pablo, California. I have 3 children and a wife.
And tell me a little bit about what it is you do as a lineman. I have a general idea.
Well, as an electrical lineman, our duties is to maintain the infrastructure that distributes power throughout Northern California. So that all entails setting the poles that carry the electricity, the power lines, what we call them, and the utility poles, and also as well as the underground infrastructure as well. So that goes from, so the power that goes to each person's house, that where they can cut on their toaster, their television. When you flip the light switch, we are responsible for the electrical power going to your units.
Got it. I know that, electricians will do the wiring and things like that for buildings, houses, and all that. So, and when they are studying, they might come through an apprentice program or something like that. How does one become a lineman?
Yes. So just like inside wiremen, so we are all, as inside wiremen, we are all part of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and we also go through apprenticeship as well. For our area and for Northern California, the local utility hires apprentices, so you get hired on as an apprentice through the local utility, and they control and maintain the apprenticeship. One way would be to hire on with the local utility. The second way would be to hire in to sign up with the IBEW, and then find a company that's willing to take on an apprentice, and then you have to commute back and forth from Southern Cal to the Bay Area when they have classes.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, because you just never know if someone might have been curious about it or interested, and now they'll know. Is there anything else you want to say about yourself before we go into the questions?
No.
Okay, good. As I love to say, let's dive on in. So let's talk about music. What is your favorite song and why, either right now or all time?
I would say one of my favorite songs, one that always resonates with me or sticks in my head, is the OJ's My Girl. And I guess it was because it was one of the songs that my father used to listen to all the time. So it just kind of a sense of nostalgia when I hear it.
Okay. And is it more that it reminds you of your dad, or does it remind you of a particular time? Like, I know some guests will talk about, their Saturday mornings with their dad or something like that.
I would say reminds me more of my dad, just hearing it, in a particular time, like when I was, younger, and we were living, because he stayed in Oakland, so I can remember being at his house in Oakland, or even driving in the car, because I don't know if it was, I guess it was 8 tracks back then, but it was on heavy rotation. I don't know how he was listening to it, but right, because it was in the car at the house. Like I said, I can't even recall if it was on the record player or whatever, but I remember it was in heavy rotation.
Oh my God, just hearing that phrase, heavy rotation. I grew up in the cassette era, and I can tell you that there are some cassettes that they broke because they were on heavy rotation.
Absolutely. Where you got to try to glue it back, right? Take it loose and glue it back. If you had a Memorex and it had screws, you could open it up, right? that whole process.
Yes, I remember all of that. So, what is a favorite childhood memory and why?
I guess it would be going camping with my family, and I guess it was just one of the things where we were able all to get together, and it was good and bad, right? Because as the bad part was we had to carry all the stuff out of the vehicles before we went to go play, throw a rock, put a fishing pole in the water, or any of that, right? We had to get all the stuff out of the vehicles and set up the tent, set up the area, and then once that time was over, right, we were actually, we were released, right? We could just go and run and destroy and mess up and have as much fun as we possibly could. And it was all the cousins were together, right? So, and I didn't have brothers, so it was when I got to have a lot of my male cousins or figures around me, which was pretty fun.
That sounds cool. Did you have sisters? Because you mentioned how that was the time that you got to hang out with some of your cousins, your male cousins. Did you grow up with sisters, or you were had the experience of being an only child?
Well, I did have sisters. I do have sisters, but I was an only child pretty much for a good period of time, living with my mom. My two older sisters, which were 6 years older and 5 years older, stayed with my grandmother in Vallejo. So my mom just had me, and it was just me and my mom for a significant amount of time. And then my middle sister came to live with us around when I was about 9, I believe.
Okay, that's a very interesting. Just the different kinds of relationships that you had there.
Yeah, definitely. It was like kind of weird, kind of like, huh? Yeah.
I got it. So then let's talk about accomplishments. And I asked this question in two parts. First, what's an accomplishment that means the most to you personally? And then what accomplishment is the one that you hear a lot of, other people hear it and go, oh, or really? So let's start with the first one. Which accomplishment means the most to you personally?
Wow, that's a good one. I would like to have said, my profession accomplishment, so becoming a lineman, because it's not a lot of African-American linemen within, the industry. I can recall my union was taking a training program to train linemen out in Suriname, South America. So, because Suriname, South America, it was a area that was colonized by the Dutch, but they had brought Africans over. So, pretty majority of the people are African descent mixed with Amerindians, which is like natives, sort of like Indians, and then the Indians with like with the dot, like Sikhs, sort of, if I got the right terminology. So all those cultures are mixed into one, but then the Dutch left and kind of left them, on their own pretty much after they had released control of Suriname. So we were going to Suriname, and we were getting all the equipment that we were getting together to ship to Suriname. And it was another union member. He was up out of Nevada, worked from Nevada utility. But we are all in the same union, because our union spans a nice amount of area. And when I told him I was a lineman, he had this look like he couldn't believe it, right? He was like, "Oh, no, you're not a lineman. What's your classification? What do you do?" And I said, "No, I'm a lineman." He said, nah, honestly, what do you do? I said, "I'm a lineman." And he's looking around at the other union members who happen to be all white, like him, as for like, he's pulling my leg here, right? And they look like, yeah, he's alive. And he was like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. Well, I met one of you back 20 years ago, he was a good guy, and because he just couldn't believe that I was a lineman, because it's not one of the trades that African Americans are into, because of the process of getting in, and the barriers of employment that are put in place to make it difficult for you to choose that as a profession.
That covers an accomplishment that means a lot to you personally. What is an accomplishment that you get a special reaction to, that others go, wow?
I guess at this point, I'm 45, 46. I guess it doesn't anymore, but at the time, it was an accomplishment. I had purchased my first home at 20. So
wow.
that was like a wow for everyone. It was like, oh yeah, I own my own home. And they're like, huh? I'm like, what? You do what? Right? And then I had 2 homes, and it was like, you own 2 homes? Like, and it was for me, I guess it was still an accomplishment that I took a lot of pride in, because it was breaking a barrier, right?
Absolutely. I can tell you right now, if I met someone today who said that they were 20, I mean, I'm thinking about all the students I've taught, and any of them, if they owned a house 2 years after graduation, I'd be like, wow, how did that happen? How did you get there?
Well, like I said, I guess it was just determination. So it was me and my wife. We were living together in Oakland, and we were paying $1,500. I think it started off as something like $1,100 when we first got there, and then towards the end it was like $1,500, because it was just, the rent was just going up $50 every 6 months. It felt like, and I think it had to be every 6 months, right? It was going up $50. So it got to the point like we're paying all this money for this little bitty matchbox that was hot, right? Because it was the 3rd floor facing the sun. So all the sun came in and would just cook the inside of the house without any AC.
Okay.
So I just decided that, enough was enough, and I had to purchase a home. So I called up a person, had him come over to the apartment, and he basically told me, no, you can't purchase a house. Nope, you don't have this. Nope, you don't have that. I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And then I saw like one of those penny saver papers, advertisers, like local paper that have all the advertised cars or whatever.
Yeah.
Different things like, and I looked at something, and the advertisement was actually in Spanish. But by the icon, the equal opportunity and housing lending, I saw that icon, which was just on the side. So I called it up. And when the person answered the phone, they were like, hey, we're speaking in Spanish, and I'm like, no habla español. And they was like, oh, sorry, how are you? How can we help you? I said, well, I'm trying to purchase a home and this, that, and other. And then I brought up, and they set up an appointment, and I brought them my check stubs. And at the time, I was an iron worker, and I was making good money, right? So
yeah.
They looked at everything and told me, they was like, well, yeah, you got to get this and you got to get that. And so I was able to purchase my first home for $75,000. It was only a 2-bedroom home.
Nice. I love that. And what I really hear is just your perseverance. What is a favorite quote, saying, metaphor, or book, and why?
I guess the quote would be Shirley Chisholm, and it was unbought and unbossed. I guess that would be the one for me. Hearing her story and just really not knowing of her for so long a period of time, right? Like I said, I guess the first time I had heard her name was in a KRS-One song. Reagan was the president, but I voted for Shirley Chisholm. That was the first time I had heard her name. And then later on, just not having anything to do with school, just starting to do the research and getting a little bit more about her story and her successes. Like I said, the other one was if they don't have a seat at the table for you, a seat at the table, bring a folding chair, right? And that's like pretty much majority of all the places that I've been or have been going is we kind of have to nudge our way into the room because we're not invited, never.
Got it. Yeah. Cool. I used to love sharing Shirley Chisholm's story. I would just kind of give a bare bones introduction to her, and then they would see a little bit of her campaign, and they would be like, "Oh, so Obama wasn't the first person?" No,
Yeah,
honey.
right.
He was the first one to win. He was the
Yeah,
first one to win.
and the first one to be picked up by a major party. But it just goes to show that how and who teaches our history. I feel that's where we lose at so much, is because the people who are teaching us are not really into teaching us, right? That's not that they're into information that is for controlling purposes. At 45, I feel that it was just so much more they could have gave us, or I could have been given for a mind that was seeking knowledge. Even though I give hats off to a lot of the educators I had, I just see that the structure that they have in place that's above their pay grade makes it hard to actually educate and engage students to where that they want to pay attention or want to say this is worth learning. Hats off to the profession.
Thank you.
We should be paying them what we pay CEOs, honestly.
I'm not going to argue with you. All right, so let me ask you this. Is there a person, conversation, moment, or event that stands out as changing the trajectory of your life, or one that had a significant impact on your life?
I would have to say when at a period of time I was making bad choices. I had landed myself in a predicament where I was incarcerated, and I had a job as a trustee that until we would go get the trays, the food for the rest of the folks that were housed in the facility, and bring it to them. So one of the deputies looked at me and he said, "Douglas, why are you here?" And you get to telling your story and things that. No, he said, "Nah." He said, "I can look on your and see what you did or what your conviction is or whatever. But why are you here?" And I'm like, well, and the rest of the folks that kind of went on was up in front. And he says, "You don't belong here." He said, "Some of the folks that I run into belong here." And it's like, "You don't belong here at all." He was like, "I suggest that you know what I'm saying, you use this opportunity to make a change," right? And I had already was in my head planning my process on what I was going to do better and things of that nature, right? Because my issue what I had for myself, or a problem, that was that I had never had a job prior to that point, and I was 18, right? And it wasn't that I didn't try to get a job. I just didn't. I tried like 3 times to fill out an application and try to get a job, but was never hired. So it was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not supposed to work, right? On a 9-to-5 job per se. So when he had that conversation with me, it just reiterated in my mind that that was something that I needed to change. So along with a lot of other things that were happening, that was one that kind of stuck with me in my head, was this is not a place that you ever need to be in, and if doing this is what got you here, well, you can't do that anymore. And like I said, after that, I didn't go. I tried going back to school for a hot minute, but then I was just like, you know what? School is not going to pay me, right? Like I can't go to junior college. I have to go out and get a job. Reached out to the community lady that had been helping me, and she got me plugged in with the iron workers, and that was how I got into the trades. Right? It wasn't, and that was from she was friends with with Rich Sorrow, who was the Mission Hiring Hall executive director and was a past iron worker at the time. And we had a meeting over at her office after I got off my other job, and he asked me what I want to do. At the time, I knew I wanted to be a glazer. And he was like, you don't want to be a glazer. They don't work all the time. I can get you hooked up with iron workers today, this, that, and other. I'm like, nah, I want to be a glazer, right? And mine is headstrong about what I need. And then after he said, well, if you want to be a glazer, I don't have nothing now. It's going to take you a minute, but I can get you into iron workers today if you want to be an iron worker. I went home and I was thinking like, man, I got to make more money than what I'm making here at this temp agency job, right? And I've been here for a year. They're not going to make me permanent. Like I said, right? I don't care how many boxes I move. This is, I'm just going to be a temp. So I called him back up and was like, yeah, I'm ready. I can be an iron worker, right? And he signed me up, and I was working with at the first site was the San Francisco General Hospital parking facility, and I was working all the way up until 11 years. Did that for 11 years, and then was dismayed a little bit because I went in for some different positions, right? And I don't know if I have time for this, but so what started me with the iron workers was I had applied for 2 positions that were city positions. One was a state position, one was a city position, and I didn't. So when I journeyed out, became a journeyman. It was a group of us that we all commuted together, and everyone was saying where they were going to go work, for what company and what outfit or whatever. And I was still doing reinforcing bars, rebar. So one guy said he was going to go work for the city. I'm like, oh, okay, I was good. And then a year later, that same job that I had figured out and I had applied for, and so they sent me a card saying, hey, this position's open. So I applied for the position, and they told me I wasn't qualified for it. And I'm like, right? And so on the announcement, it says you have to have 3 years journeyman, and I mean, you have to have a year journeyman and 3 years apprenticeship, right? I had to complete a 3 years apprenticeship. Well, I only had 6 months as a journeyman, right? But the problem with that was the person, just a year prior, one of the guys who I was in the apprenticeship with was hired directly out of apprenticeship. Right. And the thing was, his father was a superintendent already for the city, and they just pulled him right in, right? Irish guy, just yeah. So I called up the guy. I had been calling, still had his number, like, hey, trying to get a hold to him, and he wasn't answering. So I found out where their yard was, and went to the yard and was, hey, I'm looking for such and such. He's like, oh no, he's away. We sent him to school, and room full of white guys, and I'm like, hey, well, your name is Baker, such and such. I say, hey, I'm Cloudell. I applied for the job, but you guys said I didn't qualify, I didn't, you know what I'm saying, but I got this much experience, this much, and he's like, oh, well, you didn't qualify, and I'm like, well, how did I not qualify, but you guys hired this fella right out of the apprenticeship, and they all had, so the whole room, all white guys, all their whole face just went red, from white to red, right? And I just said, oh, okay, thank you, have a good day, right? And at that point, I was just like done. And then the same thing happened with the Golden Gate Bridge, same similar thing, right? And it was just like, man, like you do all the things that you're supposed to do, but they put these small barriers in place that they know that you won't be able to get over, and to the so that point is like, man, I didn't even get in the door to even sell myself, right? That was hurtful. And soon after that, I was just like, you know what? we try something else. And I was like, I'm a journeyman. If it don't work, I'll go back. And one of the things I did, I went and got my real estate license, and I did that for a couple of years, and then
Okay.
to go work for the local utility. But yeah.
Yeah, it's the whole thing about the American dream is that, if you do what you're supposed to do, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and there is an underappreciation in the larger society for the role that and just the role of that personal reference, both in terms of having access to the information, and then even when you have the information, then being given the same opportunity. And sometimes when people hear the word, when we talk about being given an opportunity, the emphasis is on given, as if it's about doing someone a favor, and it's versus the emphasis being on opportunity, like that it even is an option. So I appreciate that story, and that I will make sure I edit in a way that can that is in.
No, absolutely. So so it's just one of those things where you just like, wow, but you keep pushing away, but you do, and like I say, you just don't, no one can really tell you what you're in store for until you actually go through it, right? And it's like, and now you as you go through these roadblocks and these hurdles, like it's a meme that comes to my head where they have the folks on the track and on the track, and they're running, and it's one side of culture has it wide open for them, and the other culture has all these pitfalls and barriers blocking to make it harder to maneuver. And and when you talk to other folks from other culture, they just don't believe. And at this point, with everything that's going on in society, they have to believe it, right? I don't see how you can say it's not happening or that's not true, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother story. That gets covered in another episode. Yeah. Anyway, so I also just want to double back on, we were talking about conversations or people, moments that change the trajectory of your life. And I just noticed a theme in all these interviews. It's so often a conversation. And I think about that person who worked in that facility who pulled you aside. And I heard you say that you were already, you already had recognized that, you needed to do something different. You didn't want to go back. But I just like emphasizing on the podcast the importance of these conversations, that you never know what you might say to someone that really does have an impact and change the trajectory of their life. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem. Like I said, I wasn't sure if I wanted to go that deep into it.
Now let's talk about, what is a moment or event that highlights your experience as a Black man in America, either by putting a spotlight on it, or it's just something that stands out as, oh wow, Black man in America.
I think back to this now, but and oftentimes, but so I was a young guy, and I think I had to be like 17 at the time, and and I was at the Cliff Houses, and I was just hanging out, and a regional park police officer comes by. He's shining a light on all the vehicles or whatever, and he comes back to my vehicle, knocks on the window. I step out, and he asked me for my ID and things of that nature. And at the time, I had a false ID, so I gave him the false ID, and I had this false ID so I could purchase alcohol, right? So it said I was 21. And when he ran the ID and didn't say, came back, but I wasn't on any paperwork, didn't have any issues with the police or whatever. And he couldn't believe it. And he was just like, nope, you're 21 and you've never been arrested by the police. You've never had anything by the police. And he sat there, and we sat there on the side of the vehicle for so very long. And it dawned on me, it's like, okay, so the process of as a Black person in America is that you are going to have some interaction with law enforcement in your life. And he was steadfast on, I had to have had some interaction with law enforcement. He could not believe it, and it was like I said, and he's looking at this ID, and he's like, no, and he just could not believe it. And that right there, at one moment, as I thought back, I was like, everything that we do, the system is set up in a way that we are supposed to be on some type of paperwork or parole or in some form of an institution, you know what I'm saying, before we get to be 18. And so I guess it was just to see that this law enforcement officer, it looked like he had probably had maybe 20 years, maybe 10 to 20 years on as a park and as a regional police officer. Okay.
Well, I will say this, I would be remiss because I have, there are all different kinds of people who could listen to this, and there's going to be someone who listens and goes, well, yeah, but you did show him a fake ID.
It wasn't the point of the ID. The ID, the part of was it that he couldn't believe that a person that was 21, and I think I was 22 years old, a person that was 22 years old, an African-American male, 22 years old, had not had any dealings with law enforcement, where there was a record.
There
was a record on file of me, and I was entered in the system in any form or fashion, and that's what he, you know what I'm saying, and it was like, wow, and I was like, is it something, and so it always throws back to me that they have the system structured to where they know you're supposed to have encountered law enforcement by this age in your period, by growing up in some form.
No, I do get it. Have you had any interactions with law enforcement?
Well, I answered that one. That one several times, but I can say, so one time me and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, we were living in Vallejo, and it was something, we were having a discussion, heated discussion. She happened to be screaming, right? And she was upset. So she was yelling and arguing at me, and I'm sitting on the couch, talking in a calm manner, but whatever it was, she was highly upset, and she's screaming at the top of her voice. And we lived in an apartment. So one of our neighbors called law enforcement. So, and in the must of us having a conversation, I was saying, hey, you need to really stop screaming like this. Someone's going to think I'm doing something to you, right? So, sure enough, the police show up. They're knocking on the door, and you hear the forceful knock on the gate. Bam, 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 bam. I said, now you know who that is, right? So I said, so I don't get up from the couch. I said, well, they're there for you, so you need to go answer it. Was like, hey, we got a call. We're here for this, that, and the other. So she lets him in. So I'm still sitting on the couch, haven't moved. It says, well, do you live here? I said, yes, I do. I need to see your ID. I said, you don't need to see my ID. I said, why do you need to see my ID? I said, I didn't invite you in, and I don't have a problem, right? He says, well, we're going to take you to jail. And now she's saying, oh, wait a minute, officer. And I said, what are you wait a minute, officer, for now? I said, I told you to stop screaming hours ago, right? So these two officers, they're in the house, and he's like, well, we're going to need to see ID. And I'm like, I'm not giving you ID. I said, I didn't do anything, and I'm in my own home. Well, we're going to take you to jail if you don't. So she's begging with me to give him the ID. So I reluctantly pull the ID up, and I put it on the table, on the counter. And he says, well, no, you have to hand it to me. I said, I'm not handing
What?
you anything. No, you got to hand it to me. I said, I'm not handing you anything. Please, babe, hand him the ID. Hand him the ID. I said, I'm not handing him nothing, right? And I said, it's all your fault. I told you to stop screaming, and this is the result. So they run the ID, see everything fine, and they leave. So 2 weeks after that, I got my daughter in the car, and at that time I did have I had a vehicle that had tinted windows. The officers pulled me over, and they saw that was the same vehicle that was parked in front of the stall of the address. So
Yeah.
2 officers pulled me over, and they run my ID, and I think it was my birthday or the day. It was the day after my birthday. And so my license had expired, and it happened to be a Saturday, right? But my license had expired on a Saturday or whatever. So it's like, oh no, your license had expired, so we're towing the car, and I'm like, well, I said it's one day. You guys are gonna tow my vehicle, so they put me and my daughter out on the sidewalk, like 50 feet away from our residence. They towed the vehicle. I take the and then it happened to be MLK weekend, kind of fell on the same time around my birthday, so everything was closed at that time. So instead of it being one day and being able to have to go get my car out, I had to wait 3 days or something like that. And I had to go down to the station, get the watch commander, which is I guess the captain or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was like, "What? They towed your car and took." I say you had license, like say it was 1 day off of being expired, right? And, and I said, he was like, "Yeah." So he had to release the vehicle. Well, he had to sign the form to release the vehicle, or it would have been like I say, it would have been 2 more days or something like that. But that was the altercation that just, I guess,
kept on giving.
Yeah, right.
And just for clarification, these were the same 2 officers.
Same 2 officers. Exact same 2 officers that pulled me over. All right. And like I said, 20, 30, maybe 50 feet away from my home. Right. I was like, what?
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't even, I would like to think that it wasn't this deliberate, but if they saw, it almost makes you wonder, were they waiting? Were they looking for an opportunity? Anyway.
Yeah, no, because they were pretty upset at my actions, but I was pretty upset at the whole interaction, right? Like I said, they were doing at the time. I know they were called, right? So they came to the house because they were called. But at the time that my wife came to the door and said, "Hey," and you could see that she was crying, right? But there's nothing, physically wrong with her in any form or fashion that. You don't need my name. Just talk to her, right? Like I said, she can go outside. Y'all can close the door, and she can have a conversation of why she was screaming.
And I think I think one of the things that happens, and it's kind of, in some ways, I'm almost a little embarrassed that it's the first time I'm thinking of it this way, but that the interactions that Black men have with police officers want complete control, and they want to dominate. But when you're dealing with another man, like, there's a certain amount of dignity that is, desired, wanted, expected. And so then when those 2 clash, you get escalation.
No, that usually always happens, right? Like I said, a lot of times when you have a female officer, if they don't haven't had the tendencies of their male officers, they de-escalate things a lot easier. And I remember a time where I was pulled over at the hospital, and I think I made a U-turn or something, or I did something that I wasn't supposed to do, or a car was involved that I had to try to maneuver around, and I was upset at the vehicle, but the police saw me when she pulled me over. I was upset, and she's like, "Wait a minute," and she talked to me like a mother figure in terms, but it brought the tension that I had all the way down, right? Yeah. And she was like, "I don't want to give you a ticket." Say what you did was crazy. This and other, right? But it was like, So what I want you to do, get back in the car, think about what you did, have it, you know what I'm saying, and then we're gonna start this conversation all over again. And it was like, hey, how you doing? And I was like, how are you? Right? And but it was like, you know, if that was a male, it would have been, rah. Majority of the time would have been, I'm tougher, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm badder. And, you know, the end result, you know, you have someone with a badge and handcuffs and the law on their side, most likely going to lose that battle. Yeah.
Like I said, you're rich with detail. I love it. Cloudell, if the United States was a woman, lover, friend, stranger, neighbor, whatever, what would you say to her?
Ooh. As a lady, I would try to appeal to her humanity and dealing with everyone within the culture, African American, indigenous, and also immigrants or migrants. I don't even like to call them immigrants, migrants, because they're just folks moving from one area to a different area in hopes of finding a better way of life. Just try to appeal to her humanity and ask her, why are you so insistent of hurting and injuring your family, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all family. I just see that certain folks don't see us as family or see us as a threat when we're not a threat. If the United States could see us the way we see us, as in all our glory and grandeur, as opposed to how they see us as killers and rapists and people who wish to inflict harm on others. You see my hand, it's not a weapon, it's a hand, it's an open hand extended to welcome you, as opposed to an instrument of harm. Which I believe that's how they see us in most times. When, you know, and this has to do with law enforcement, but also to do with just regular other citizens that see us in this negative light, right? And we're portrayed as villains at every juncture. And when will she see us as her family?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
What is love to you?
Another hard question from a male, right? And I guess I have to let my wife listen to this because she'll be holding on to every word to hear what I say. She's like, what? Oh, someone got an answer? So I would say commitment and understanding, and understanding, and compassion, and the other one would be not forgiveness. It's the other one. Shoot. Darn it! It's the words are evading me, but it would have to be. Got me sweating and everything. Like you can't see me, but I'm starting to sweat and all this. Right? I feel like she might be at the door listening.
I'm gonna actually, in your case, Cloudell, I'm actually gonna ask you something else. I'm gonna ask what you love about your wife.
Her loyalty and understanding.
And what does her loyalty and understanding provide you?
What it provides me is safety, knowing that I am safe. I'm in a safe place, a location, a place where, although she believes that I don't truly show vulnerability, but that that I know that I'm safe with her.
Yeah. You know, I may not leave this in, but I would say that love for you is a safe space. No, I'm going to leave in what you said, but I may not leave my conclusion. And my conclusion is that love for you is a safe space.
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool. what is something you've learned through your profession, training, experiences, or adventures that you believe more Black men should know?
You know, the people that you call your friends or who you are close with and starting off with may not necessarily be the people that you close with later on down your life. So don't structure your life around those people because you know they they're seasonal, right? Even though I have people that I still grew up with, our relationship isn't still the same. When I was younger, I never would have thought that we would have come to a point where we weren't as thick as thieves or bosom buddies or whatever to that point. But you outgrow certain people. Although I still interact with folks and they're still considered friends. And then as far as adventures, I travel a lot now. And that's one of like my biggest things that I like to do is just to see where and how other people are living. And I guess it may just be a inner city thing. Like if I go abroad somewhere, I don't want to be in the just the tourist place. I can do all the tourist stuff, but I have to go see where the locals live. I have to see how folks are living and who they are, and I have to see poverty, right? And because I know when you see poverty, you get to see that culture stripped down, right?
Yeah.
How people really are and how people are really dealing with in their day-to-day life. Even though if I can't even speak the language, right? Like we find a way to communicate, or I find a way to communicate, and they find a way to communicate back, right? To where I can get a sense of how things are doing in their daily life, and then I try to make sure that I spend money with those folks as opposed to spending money with the place where they want me to spend money at. I want to spend money with the folks that actually need it, right?
I
And
love that. You actually, I also love to travel. Although I must say I haven't been traveling as much in the last couple of years, but I was someone who would tend to, go. I do all the tourists, the highlights, do the highlight reel, and the comfy, cushy places. And I am most inspired by the opportunity to have my money go to those communities where it would make a huge difference. Like if I'm just going to get a Coke and a burger, it doesn't have to be the one that's right off the tourist side.
no,
Again,
absolutely, yeah.
keeping all safety in mind, but still, like I appreciate you sharing that as an opportunity. And you don't even have to be someone who travels internationally, because frankly, I've gone to DC many times, and I tend to always stay on the beaten paths when I know that there are other communities that might benefit from my patronage. So here's the last question. Now that we've had this conversation, is there anything that you see newly or anything that is now more clear than it was before?
Well, like the reason why I'm the president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists is because I want to. My dad, it's kind of funny. My dad had told me he wanted me to become an iron worker, right? And I didn't want to be an iron worker because he worked with iron workers as a machinist because he had told me coming out of high school, hey, you should sign up with the iron workers, and I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. And at the time, I was still thinking that okay, I'm going to go to school and get a degree or whatever. And after that didn't work, I still wasn't thinking iron worker. So when I'm sitting in the office with Rich Sorrow and he's telling me, hey, I plug you in with the iron workers, I'm like, what? So then when I end up becoming an iron worker, I'm like, 5 years later, as from when my father had threw out the information of joining the iron workers that I totally dismissed. Right, I'm an iron worker, and it was like, okay, so I can't say that he didn't give me, that bit of information because he did, right? He didn't have the ability to plug me into the ironworkers like Rich Zorro did, but he told me that to go ahead and apply, right? And just left it on me to do it.
Yeah, parents know things. First, I just want to say again, thank you, Cloudell, for making the time. One of the things that I got out of just being in this conversation with you is just an appreciation for how committed you are to creating opportunities for others. And I really do just love your perseverance with things, like just in hearing the story about how far you went to get that job. I mean, it didn't come your way. I'm talking about the one where the other person in the apprentice program was hired, but you weren't. The fact that you went down to ask the questions, like you didn't just get a no and leave it alone. And I just admire that kind of perseverance, and I hope others are heartened by it. It's like, it may not pay off in each and every instance that we persevere, but over time as a character trait, it's like, it's access to having what you want in life. So thank you for being an example of perseverance. I appreciate that.
Thank you for listening. As you can hear, you do not want to miss any of these brothers. Make sure you subscribe. You can find more at our website, 365brothers.com, 365brothers.com. This is Robin Shine. To listen is to love.